So the long-anticipated Robert Eggers' Nosferatu has finally came out. I wish it didn't really come out during Christmas. I wish it came out back in October. Whatever. It's a remake of F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, which is like a loose, unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, because Stoker's widow didn't want to allow it. And it's a great movie. The 1922 film. Some people think it's scary, some people don't think it's scary. I think it is scary. But like, what's interesting is like, you think that today people wouldn't like it because of the age, like, because it's been over 100 years. But like, even back then, it was very divisive on if it was scary or not in Germany. With like, when you look at like some of the critic reviews. So it's a very subjective film, but I think it is scary mainly because of Max Schreck's performance, the makeup how he looks. It's very terrifying. It's something about him looks very real. But also another thing that adds to it is the film's direction. It has a very dreamlike feel to it, like kind of like most silent horror movies, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Very like just overall like dreamlike, weird feel to it. And just in the shots, obviously the German expressionism, like that, the scene of him going into Hutter's room is terrifying, and the build-up is great. Overall, amazing film. It's like one of the best Dracula movies. I think it's better than the 1931 Dracula movie. That's kind of my thing with the Dracula, like adaptations of a book. I think the Nosferatu movies are all better, but I mean, like, I do, but at the same time, I do kind of like, I like the Christopher Lee, the first, like, Hammer film, horror Dracula, or Dracula, how it is properly in England. I think that's a really good movie. I like Dracula in that, and I like that telling of the story. I also do kind of enjoy Count Dracula, Bram Stoker's Count Dracula, the other Dracula adaptation that he did. That was also a pretty interesting, like independent European film that he did. That starred Klaus Kinski as Renfield, who then 9 years later would star in the remake of Nosferatu by Werner Herzog. That film I love. It is my favorite Dracula movie overall. When it comes to all the Nosferatu films, I love that movie. I mainly love it just because of how Herzog brought his very unique documentary style into like a very, a genre film. Because Nosferatu is a genre film, not that it's a bad thing. It's, it's this like genre horror film, and Herzog hadn't done anything like it, and he hasn't really done anything like since. And it's a very unique film. Klaus Kinski, I know he's not the best person, but I think his acting as Dracula is great. It's a good balance of like a tragic vampire but still he's like he's very creepy and like Predator-esque. Because I mainly rewatching the film again, I love his acting, and when you first go to when Harker first meets Dracula in that film, he just seems like a very pleasant, quirky guy, but then once Harker cuts his thumb, Dracula just goes berserk at that point. It's very good, and also I think, and the performance is, besides being like sympathetic and creepy, he's all like this Dracula feels like still feels a little more human in terms of just like how he acts. This is the first time like I feel like it's a Dracula that's not so like powerful, like overtly powerful, or he's not constantly doing he's not doing a bunch of magic tricks. He's just this pale bald guy who just who has to constantly run back and forth to get his coffins with the Black Death in it. It's a very it's a very humanist look into Dracula, because while Werner Herzog has said that he loves the Murnau film, He didn't like Max Schreck's character just because of how, like, you know, there's no character to him. And he really brought a sort of character to, you know, Dracula in this film. And I think it's great. It's a great movie. And I just love what he adds to the table. It's one of my favorite horror films. You know, and like looking at the year, it was, you know, John Carpenter's Halloween, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire, and then you know, 1980s Stanley Kubrick The Shining. Those are like my favorite horror films right there. Like 3 years in a row. It's crazy. And so when then it was announced that, like, you know, Robert Eggers, he's doing a remake of Nosferatu, I was kind of like, you know, I didn't really feel like it needed to be like an exact adaptation of this story again, because, like, you know, Nosferatu the Vampire is like you know, I think should have only been the only remake, just because, like, mainly because it was just to bring this film into a sound environment in the 70s, and I didn't think it needs to. I think just give it more of that Dracula edge to it. But anyway, like, but if he was going to still go with it, I was kind of like, okay, well then add some things to, you know, from the book into it. Mainly, like, you know, put Dracula's wives in there. Actually have Van Helsing be a, you know, like a, you know, just have Van Helsing vampire hunter in there. Because Nosferatu, there's no Van Helsing character. They, in, like, you know, the US cuts where they just named everyone, you know, off of a book, their characters are in the, you know, the names, like, are in there. Like, there was a doctor character who was called Dr. Van Helsing, because there's another doctor character like Bulworth, who is, or no, I think it's Dr. Sievers. Yeah, Bulworth was renamed to Van Helsing, and I think Sievers was Dr. Seward. But then it's something like Van Helsing, and then in Nosferatu the Vampire, there's a character called Dr. Van Helsing, who is basically Dr. Seward, because he doesn't really, he's a non-believer of vampires, and in some way it really comes off like as an origin story to him being a vampire hunter, because he does kind of like stake Dracula at the end, but it's like, dude's 90, so I don't think he's going to be off hunting vampires after that film. So Robert Eggers as a director, his career I'm a little mixed on, to be honest. I really love The Witch. The Witch was really good horror film. Kind of reminded me of the Crucible, just because it takes place around the same era. And it was kind of cool how, like, they were speaking in that, like, you know, that age, like the dialogue of that age. It's like kind of, it's a little Shakespearean-esque, but it's like a little closer to our English that we speak. Very interesting, and the performances from Anna Taylor-Joy, Ralph Inson, who I always refer to as UK Packer, because he's the Todd Packer equivalent in the UK Office. The wife character is great, and the child acting overall from the older brother and the two twins, their acting is really good. It's great, and the cinematography was all great. I loved it. Good, creepy movie. Actually, when I was watching it, I really thought one of the witches in the film was Summer Glau from Firefly, but it wasn't. It looked really like her. And then there was the Lighthouse, which is a great-looking movie, and that's it. And like, I think the performances are pretty decent, but like overall, the movie kind of like gets to a point where it's just like, I don't know. It's weird. It's a little weird. That's all my thoughts. It's a weird movie, but it gets to a point where it's like, it's just it got a little too artsy for me. And then The Northman is kind of the same thing. This one does have a very, like, you know, it's the Hamlet story. Well, not really, because it's like not the actual story of Hamlet, but not the exact Shakespeare story. But, you know, it's a typical story of, like, you know, a son avenging his father from his uncle taking over. It's a very typical story, but I thought, you know, some parts were kind of slow. It got a little too artsy at times for me. So, you know, it's at this point, you know, like, so, you know, leading up to this movie, he only made like one movie I really loved, and then two others that I'm kind of like so-so on. But Nosferatu, where it's like now it's like I like 50% of his films and 50% I'm very so-so on. Because I really loved Nosferatu. Definitely is him taking his amazing craft, filmmaking style, it's like, you know, interesting like character, introspective, and as a way to retell the story of Dracula, and it was amazing. It's got a great cast, so I'll just like, you know, quickly talk about it. You have Lily Rose Depp. Would have been Anna Taylor-Joy because, you know, they did The Witch and the Northman together, and I think, you know, Anna Taylor-Joy was going to do it, but I think maybe it was Furiosa that she did that, you know, did over this film because this movie was announced, like, I think after The Witch. Like, I think that's what he wanted to do after, but I guess there was just countless, like, delays, maybe like lack of studio interest. But Lily Rose Depp, she's pretty good in this film as the character, you know, as the Mina character. Well, she's Helen in this. They do this, so look, they do kind of do the same thing where she is in this sort of like love, sexual relationship with, you know, Count Orlok, Dracula. A little bit kind of similar to the Bram Stoker film, and then, you know, you have the Jack Palance film, where it's like, you know, very different. Where, like, you know, Helen isn't some kind of a reincarnation from Orlok's past. She kind of like just summoned this person, and, like, you know, because I think in the film she has kind of these powers of like sort of weird psychic powers that like can see like death, bad things on the horizon or stuff. But a lot interesting in Bram Stoker's Dracula, where it's just a reincarnation. And also, after seeing just Lily Rose Depp as an actress overall, I know, now I know that she is really good. Because the only film of hers that I saw her in was Yoga Hosers. She is way better in this film than she is in that film, but that's not her fault. That's because it was written by a 40-year-old man who doesn't know how teen girls act. I have Nicholas Hoult as the Jonathan Harker character. I like it. You know, he's good. I've always liked Nicholas Hoult. I like him as Beast in the X-Men movies, all four. I like him as Nooks in Mad Max Fury Road. I also liked him in that Jack and the Beanstalk film that he did with Bryan Singer. That was like a while ago. Overall, like, he is a decent actor. And I think he's good in this, playing the Jonathan Harker role. He kind of plays it as, like, you know, the exact way, you know, he kind of has to be as this like vessel for the audience in the first half, like, you know, going into the Carpathian Mountains in Transylvania and meeting the Count. That's kind of like what Harker serves as in the first part of the story. And then you have Willem Dafoe as Van Helsing. Basically, I'm not gonna really I'm not gonna say his name. I forgot what his name even is in this. Third collaboration, Robert Eggers, and he's really good at this as Van Helsing. They literally make him Van Helsing because he was this, like, you know, believer in alchemy and like weird, viruses and like vampires and stuff. That's because, you know, and even the Dr. Seward character that we'll talk about later, like, even like was an apprentice of Van Helsing, kind of, I think, how it is, you know, how that's, I think, I want to say that's how the relation is in the book. That was very interesting. Willem Dafoe's great. Not his first Dracula-related film, because he was in Shadow of the Vampire, which he is really good in. My only problem with that is that, like, he looks too small in that film a little bit, because I think, like, you know, when you watch when you watch the original Nosferatu, Max Schreck is pretty tall in that movie, and like Dafoe is always like, you know, it's always like slouching down. it's like, that's not really how I think Max Shrek was. He seemed like a pretty tall dude than that. Well, what am I to say? That's like meant to be like a, you know, like a very mythical fake film that goes off the theory that Max Shrek was a like a vampire. But I really like Willem Dafoe in this. He's a great Van Helsing, one of the best. Like with like, you know, Peter Cushing and Anthony Hopkins, one of the best versions of Van Helsing. Then you got Aaron Taylor Johnson as the Arthur Holmwood character from Dracula. That's what he basically is. And he's really good in the film. It felt like just last decade, you know, in the 2010s, this guy was kind of looked down upon for just being a bland actor because they didn't really like him that much in Godzilla. That's not his fault. You know, he was just like, that character wasn't given anything much to do in the script. And Gareth Edwards isn't like the best like actor director back then. You also didn't like him as like Quicksilver in you know, in Age of Ultron, but I think that was just like the accent. And I actually, to be honest, I didn't mind him I really don't mind him in those movies, like, you know. And then he was in Tenet. And like when I saw Tenet in the theaters, I didn't even know he was in this film. I was like, oh shit, that's Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's in this film. It feels like not until it was like really like Bullet Train that everyone just started to like him again, and he was really good in that movie. And then he was like cast in this film, and he's great. I loved him in this movie as the, you know, as the Arthur character. I think it's just, you know, he's a great actor. I can't wait to see what he does in 28 years later, and just in the future. I think he's great. Then there's Emma Corrin as Anna, Aaron Taylor Johnson's wife, who's like kind of like meant to be a the Lucy character from the book. And then it's like she's like, her character is like, you know, and then in Nosferatu has like changed to like Ruth, but the Helen character in that movie it's like kind of a combination of both Lucy and Mina. And then it was weird in the Herzog film when they basically just swapped the names. Like Lucy is now the Mina character, and Mina is now the Lucy character. And Anna in this film, like, I think dies, but like they die in both Nosferatus, that character. But she has a little more character in this, and I like her. You know, they have like, you know, she has like 2 kids, two daughters. They both get killed by Dracula. It's very crazy. There's also a part when you know, after she dies and the kids die, you know, they're put into a mausoleum. Aaron Taylor Johnson just decides to like go in there and just like just opens her coffin and to just like hug her. And then I'm sitting there in the theater going like, please turn into a vampire and just eat Aaron Taylor Johnson. That would be amazing. But no, it didn't happen. He just ends up dying from the plague very quickly. That would have been that kind of been awesome. They just, you know, like the scene in, it's a little similar to the scene in you know, in the Coppola film. But come on, man, just I wish you did that. Then you have Ralph Ineson as the Dr. Seward character, Dr. Severs, and he's really good in it. You know, working with Robert Eggers. Good addition to the cast. Not much to be said. You have Simon McBurney as Knock, the Renfield character. And he was actually, I kind of liked this version. They what they kind of did was, because in all Nosferatus, the Renfield character is the boss of Jonathan Harker, and then this, like, they kind of set up like he is kind of like a regular dude, but he's got like some problems, like he's, you know, like he's laughing a little too much, but he seems like a very reasonable man at first, but then as film goes on, you know, he goes to the asylum and he's like all crazy and such. But to be honest, I mean, like, I look, I liked him, but I kind of still preferred the overtopness of the guy who played Renfield in the Herzog film. And that guy he's not even technically an actor, he's more of like an artist. That's what he really was. And I like him. He, up there with like Dwight Frye, he's definitely one of my favorite renditions of Renfield, with Tom Waits as like a close honorable mention, but I still liked this version of Renfield. Then you have, you know, the star of the film, Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok. Very interesting. He's very different from each version. Big combination of like, you know, the one in like kind of the big thing that they do is they kind of take the design of, you know, the Max Schreck Count Orlok, but then they actually put a mustache on him, and people are gonna be like, oh my, what is that? Like, why does he have a mustache? That's weird. But in the book, Dracula is meant to have like a mustache on him, and like very few adaptations have done it. The only ones that have done it is like you know, the Christopher Lee, the second Christopher Lee adaptation, and then in the Coppola version when like Dracula appears as like a younger man. So that's the only time it's been done. And he also has they gave him a very Romani accent in this, because you know, obviously Nosferatu was a silent film, but then when the Herzog film, Klaus Kinski is not doing any kind of accent. It's just it's still really his German accent, kind of like, you know, coming through. It's nothing really special. But he's basically doing the Romani accent, which, like, the only one that's really done it is like Gary Oldman. But if there's been another version where, like, you know, they're actually doing a Romani accent, I'm not really counting Bela Lugosi, because Bela Lugosi was like Bela Lugosi, that was just this Hungarian accent. That wasn't really like Romanian. And I liked most of the scenes with Count Orlok when he's just like, when he's just terrorizing and killing people. All of that was kind of fun. But like I say, you know, compared to the Klaus Kinski, I preferred that one just because what they did with his character. This one kind of just went back to the Max Schreck one, but still, it was interesting. I thought his scenes were still great. I really did. I mean, overall, I liked this movie. It was a very Hollywood mainstream version of the story, which overall, it's not a bad thing. This movie really reminded me a lot of Nosferatu. Nosferatu, obviously. And then also a lot of Bram Stoker's Dracula. I couldn't help think a lot of, but that is because like it's a very Hollywood mainstream film. It's got a very star-studded cast, the people who are very big at the moment, and and also it has a lot of lavish sets, costumes that are very good, just as good as Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it does a lot of a lot of interesting shots and visual trickery, with the Dracula character. I really the castle really did kind of make me think a lot of Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I kind of thought it was a cool combination. Like, even if I'm not big into that movie, I still thought a lot of the it was kind of cool how they did a lot of it. But I still do kind of prefer this over Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's just a great movie adaptation. I think the cast is all great. I like the renditions of these characters and just the way it's told and shot. It's amazing. And just kind of makes me think a lot about a lot of things, because people will say, oh, why do you have to retell the story again and again? And that's because sometimes these stories are great. There's a reason why these characters are so beloved. There's a reason why we keep reading these stories, because they're great. That's why we want to keep going back to them. They're fun stories to tell, and to let these auteur directors give it their all into these stories is why film is so important. It's great, and I think always give this stuff a chance. Old stories we should still continue to tell these old horror tales, yet still introduce new original ideas, because after all, when you look around, we are having a lot of original horror films coming out. So this feels like the first horror remake in a while. I mean, to be fair, like, this is like the best time it could have come out. Like, you know, you look back then, it was like there was so many horror remakes. You know, you got the Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, like most of Wes Craven's movies were getting remade. John Carpenter's movies were getting remade. So I think it was just overall good that, you know, it came out now in the midst of all these original movies. And well, yeah, I mean, I should acknowledge there are still a lot of sequels to to horror movies, but still, it's good that we had another retelling of Dracula, and that these, like, you know, these old classic literature monsters are coming back like 30 years, like since the 90s. They're getting their proper adaptations told. I know Nosferatu is a little different, but still, it's still a telling of Dracula. And now we're gonna get Guillermo del Toro's retelling of Frankenstein, which, I mean, hopefully it will be like, you know, the best adaptation since the Hammer film, which that was like a while ago. And, like, you know, I'm not really big into the kind of Brana film. And I hope Guillermo del Toro, well, I mean, I'm not hoping, I just know he's gonna make something great, a great adaptation of that story. So thank you very much, guys, for watching this video, and subscribe and see what comes next.